Bienvenidos, bienvenidas, bienvenides. Welcome back to our returning listeners, and hello to all our new audience members. If you've been listening for a while, you might know that we usually release student work between semesters. These episodes usually consist of different students sharing their final projects and cover a wide array of topics. This time, however, we will be releasing podcast episodes fully created by the students in my fall 2024 Survey of Caribbean Literature course. These students worked together in groups throughout the semester to create podcast episodes that reflected the literature, themes, and concepts we covered in the class. They researched the ideas that interested them the most and analyzed different forms of literature from the Caribbean, including novels, short stories, poetry, songs, and film. They learned how to record, edit, and produce a podcast project that they could be proud of putting out into the world. Please let them know how you feel about their work by listening and sharing this episode. Give them a shout out on social media by tagging Latinx Visions on Instagram and Blue Sky. I know I'm proud of the work they did, and they should be too. So without any further delay, here's this week's episode.
Welcome to the Talk to a podcast, a group of Caribbean descendants and appreciators who take a very deep dive and analysis into Caribbean music. If that's your thing, you're in for a treat. If not, good luck.
How are y'all doing today? I'm Leslie, and today we got a good show for you because we got Bad Bunny's Una Velita. Now, this song isn't just a hit, it's a statement. A powerful exploration of Puerto Rico's ongoing struggles, particularly in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria and the lasting effects of and political advocate. I'll be breaking this segment into three main parts. First, we'll talk about Puerto Rico's colonial history. Then we'll discuss Hurricane Maria and its devastating impact. And finally, we'll dive into the song itself, analyzing its lyrics and meaning. So without further ado, let's dive right in. To really understand the messages in Una Velita, we need to start with Puerto Rico's history, specifically its colonial history. Right now, Puerto Rico is currently a U.S. territory, but it wasn't always that way. Initially colonized by Spain, Puerto Rico came under the U.S.'s control in 1898, after the Spanish-American War. And while the term colony was eventually dropped and replaced with the term territory after World War II, according to Martin and Pace 2024, make no mistake, the colonial system never truly ended. But what is colonialism? Well, according to Murray in 2020, colonialism is defined as a country who imposes ownership and governance over the land, laws, government politics, and economy of another group. End quote. In the case of Puerto Rico, the U.S. government has maintained control over Puerto Rico without offering full representation. For example, Puerto Ricans cannot vote in presidential elections and don't have voting representation in Congress. Yet, the U.S. government imposes laws and policies that directly impact the island? That's just crazy. Now, let's take the Jones Act as an example. The Jones Act, according to Martin and Pace 2024, quote, requires that all goods shipped between the United States and Puerto Rico are transported using U.S.-owned and operated vessels. End quote. They go on to write that this is problematic because the U.S. ships that are approved are extremely slow and outdated, making imports more expensive and driving up the cost of living. This economic exploitation is a modern form of colonialism, something that a lot of us who live in poor neighborhoods can experience. And it leaves a lot of Puerto Ricans vulnerable to crises like Hurricane Maria. And speaking of modern colonialism can be seen every day in Puerto Rico. Like, for instance, the primary languages spoken are Spanish and English, to the US dollar being the currency. And let's not forget gentrification, something that a lot of us can experience, including me. These dynamics create a sense of duality, a push or pull between preserving Puerto Rican identity and being forced to adapt to imposed systems. And so this cultural and political struggle is what sets the stage for the events following Hurricane Maria. It's been about 7 years since Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico, but till this day, its impact is still deeply felt and dealt with. Quote, on September 20th, 2017, Maria was the 11th most intense Atlantic hurricane ever recorded. And it was the second Category 5 hurricane to strike the island, according to Strobe 2020. Roofs were torn off homes, neighborhoods were washed away, and the electrical grid was completely destroyed, leaving more than 3 million residents without power for a month. A lot of us go crazy without having our cell phones for more than 2 hours or an hour less. But now imagine living without any electricity for more than a month. No, like literally, imagine that. No electricity, no running water, and limited access to food or medicine for months. According to research by Adam Strobe in 2020, the situation was made worse because Puerto Rico's ports were inoperable, cutting off supply lines from the mainland, leading to widespread shortages of basic necessities. But the disaster wasn't just about the hurricane itself. It was about the systemic failures that followed. The U.S. government's response was slow and inadequate. Former President Trump notoriously downplayed the crisis, claiming Puerto Ricans wanted, quote, everything done for them. As the death toll started to rise, he dismissed it as fake news. This lack of accountability highlighted how colonial structures leave territories like Puerto Rico unsupported and vulnerable. It angers me how he wants to downplay this and pretend like Hurricane Maria and its impacts were all fake. Yet, he'll do anything to get some profit off the island. Just ridiculous. But now, let's shift gears and dive into Una Velita. This song is more than just a reflection on Hurricane Maria. It's a critique of systemic failure and a call to action. When I first listened to the song, I'll be honest, I didn't really know much about Hurricane Maria. Not because I didn't want to know about it, but I feel like here in the US, we barely talk about it or ever brought it up in a conversation. When I did take time to listen to the song more intimately, I don't want to gas it up, but I really did get goosebumps. You know, just like breaking down these lyrics, which we will be doing here, I guess you'll understand what I mean by goosebumps. Like, it's really something. So, for instance, like, let's start with one of the most striking lines in the song. He sings in Spanish, "Está empezando a llover. Otra vez va a pasar. Otra vez va a pasar. Por ahí viene tormenta. ¿Quién nos va a salvar?" This repetition of otra vez va a pasar, it's gonna happen again, is so, it's chilling. It reminds us that Hurricane Maria wasn't an isolated event. Puerto Ricans live and are continuing to live with this constant fear of another disaster, knowing they might face the same lack of support. And also, the part where he's saying, ¿Quién nos va a salvar?" is where I feel Bad Bunny starts to slowly and subtly attack the government. By asking this open-ended question, he's letting us know that a lot of Puerto Ricanos don't really trust the government. They don't have faith in them. You know, he could have asked, how will they save us? But purposely asking who shows that neither he nor the people trust the government to be the ones who save them from this inescapable nightmare. Then there's this line, "No quiero todo, quiero su manto." This is where the song's critique of the government really takes shape. Not wanting the toldo, the tarp, is a rejection of the bare minimum and a call to when blue tarps were handed out to the people after Maria. Rejecting the toldo symbolizes the rejection of the government's half-hearted response. And, you know, wanting God's manto, his mantle, is Bad Bunny emphasizing that he wants something that actually protects and endures the people. Not these temporary fixes of a blue tarp or, you know, that one clip where Trump was like throwing freaking bounty at the people, being like, oh, you know, here you go. Speaking of Trump, I just want to circle back to what he said about the death toll being, quote, fake news. If it truly were fake news, then why would Bad Bunny in almost every news article say, fueron 5,000 que dejaron morir? Now, tell me this. Could you survive what Bad Bunny is trying to say here? He says, obviamente la luz se va a ir. Sabrá Dios y nunca va a volver. El puente que tardaron en construir, el río creció, lo va a romper. In English, it means obviously the light will be gone. God only knows and will never come back. The bridge they took so long to build will be broken as the river continues to grow. So if so many of us struggle during Hurricane Sandy and, the impact that it brought to us specifically in New York, because I'm only bringing this because I'm from New York, I cannot imagine how much worse it was for Puerto Ricanos when they were experiencing Hurricane Maria. You have no gas, you have no electricity, you're literally living in the rio, in the river, and yet, Trump is saying, oh, it's fake news. They're just being dramatic. Like, what? What? And finally, we have this last lyric that I really want to bring to attention because I think, this is what he's really trying to get at in his song is, con el gobierno no me envíen nada, que esos cabrones lo van a esconder. Van para la calle, pa fotos nada más. Translation? Don't send me anything from the government. Those bastards will hide it. They're only going out on the streets just for photos. Once again, Bad Bunny is mirroring the sentiments we saw after Hurricane Maria, where many felt abandoned by the local and federal governments that are supposedly there to protect them. What's so interesting here is the change in the song's tone. He goes from a spiritual plea to now angrily calling out the government's performative response, truly capturing the frustration felt by so many Puerto Ricanos. Before we wrap up, I want to emphasize that Una Velita isn't just a song. It's a statement. It's a voice for those who were silenced in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria and a reminder of the systemic failures that continue to affect Puerto Rico. Bad Bunny's work doesn't just stop at Una Velita. In 2020, he paired his song El Apagón, the blackout, with a 23-minute documentary to describe the hardships of living with constant blackouts and gentrification. One lyric from his song that was very popularly known is Yo no me quiero ir de aquí. No me quiero ir de aquí, que se vayan ellos. Highlighting the gentrification in Puerto Rico. This is where or when investors went to small villages in communities like Rincón after Hurricane Maria to take over and buy out the homes of Puerto Ricanos whose homes got destroyed. Isn't that crazy? Like, literally your home got destroyed and people want to come over it just to buy it off you, leaving you homeless. Like, the hurricane already did that on its own. And now these, insensitive people are just coming over to buy your home, to turn it into, some apartment complex, doubling the price of rent, or, turning it into, some stupid business that they don't even need. And so, I leave you all with this comment Bad Bunny wrote on his Instagram post. This was when he released Una Velita on the 7th anniversary of Hurricane Maria. He writes, La segunda mitad de la canción es una de amor, unión y esperanza, que hasta se puede dedicar porque nadie quiere pasar un tormenta en soledad. The second part of the song is about love, union, and hope, which can even be dedicated because no one wants to go through a storm alone.
Hello, my name is Clarissa, and in my segment, I'm planning on talking about the song called Sin Aire by Rafa Pabón, which translates to Without Air. Rafa Pabón is a Puerto Rican artist who is mostly known for his urbano songs, but this specific song that Pabón wrote alludes to the police brutality that has been going on. But specifically, the Dominican Republic and Haiti, and how a lot of times Dominican people tend to do things or say things that are sadly racially motivated to each other and to Haitians as well. So let's get into it. So I'm going to mention two lyrics that I wanted to analyze and that stood out to me, and then explain what made me choose these specific quotes so that I can relate it back to my points. So the first lyric was, "Soy culpable de mi pelo rizo y de mis labios grueso. Si ser negro es un crimen, llévenme preso." So translated into English, it says, "I'm guilty of my curly hair and my thick lips. If being black is a crime, take me to prison." So I want to relate it to terms that people say about, that people talk about hair, specifically in Latino culture. And I want to bring it back to how it reminded me of another situation that I read about in an article. So in this one article, it mentioned how the term pelo malo, pelo bueno, is very heavily mentioned in the Latino community, which is very true. I myself have heard it. And basically, it means that bad hair is hair that is perceived to be tightly curled, coarse, and kinky. So that's usually what people mean when they say or call somebody, I mentioned that they have pelo malo. And that reminded me to an article that I read about Amara La Negra, who is a singer and artist. And what happened to her was during her role on TV in Love and Hip Hop Miami, there was an episode where a producer actually criticized her for her natural hair and made a slick comment and implied that she couldn't be elegant with her afro. Eventually, he apologized, and Amara La Negra went on to address the situation that had happened, but this shouldn't have happened at all. This slick comment shouldn't have been made at all. And another lyric that I wanted to mention from the song was "La verdadera pandemia es el discrimen racial." So translated, this lyric says, "The real pandemic is racial discrimination." So I want to relate this lyric actually back to a YouTube video that I watched about Dominican Republic and Haiti. The YouTube video was called "Citizenship Leaves Dominicans and Haitians Stateless." So to give some background on this video a little bit, in the video it talks about different people's experience about Dominican Republic and how in Dominican Republic they ended birthright citizenship for children born there to undocumented parents. So I wanted to mention this one specific example about from Jesus Lahome Elixir. He was unjustly held by Dominican immigration authorities in Dominican Republic for about 6 hours. And even though he asked them why they were taking him, because he had his documents and showed it to them and everything, all they said to him was that they had to quote unquote check, which made no sense at all. He had all his documentation with him. And how according to the video, it said that he is a legal resident that was born in the Dominican Republic by Haitian migrants, but he is not a Dominican citizen and cannot vote, which it actually even shows it on his ID as well, sadly. And according to the Dominican government, they say that it is because his Haitian heritage makes him a foreigner in the country of his own birth. And this happened in 2014 under the new law. So we are clearly seeing the xenophobia that they have to deal with on a daily basis in the Dominican Republic, sadly, just because of their skin color. Because even though they have all their documentation, even though they show all their documentation, they are still questioned, and it is because of their skin color. And this doesn't only happen to adults, but even to underage kids as well, who are taken by Dominican authorities, questioned, and sometimes even taken back to Haiti without their legal guardians being notified at all until hours later. And we see that as well in the YouTube video that I mentioned. And towards the end of the video, somebody actually stated that a lot of Dominicans of Haitian descent that remain in DR live in a state of fear, and that is honestly just terrible. Imagine living in the place where you feel fear all the time, can't really feel comfortable going to the grocery store or going to the market to buy food or whatever you need because you are living in a state of fear where you're afraid if, even though you have all your documents, that the authorities somehow will take you back to Haiti, or sometimes they'll take you back to immigration just to question you. And I also want to mention this quote from an interview that Rafa Babon did, kind of explaining, why it is that he wrote the song that he did and why he mentioned some of the quotes that he did. He had an interview with Billboard, and he goes on to say that it is very important that we mobilize We can't normalize these types of things. Racism is inhumane and I will never understand it. And he also says, we need to grow as humans and not allow racism, discrimination, or police brutality in this day and age, which is very true. I actually want to relate the YouTube video that I just mentioned back to a book that we read in class called Israeli Skirt by Anna Marie and Laura. She says, you were born in this country, but you are still Haitian. You will always be Haitian. Our people are treated poorly because we are free. He also says, we know when we are not being treated fairly, and that is why they hate us. So in this quote on page 22, right here in this quote, we see Miriam's father, who is Haitian, speaking to her and saying that even though she was born in the Dominican Republic, she is still Haitian. And he basically reminds her that, and even though she's Dominican, she still receives poor treatment from her own people, which will be happening in the YouTube video. They were born in the Dominican Republic, but they are still being questioned because of their skin color, even though they have all of their documentation. Now, some extra points that I just wanted you guys to keep in mind was that Rafa Pabon's song was actually released in 2020. The situation with Amara La Negra that I brought up, what happened to her on national TV from Love and Hip Hop, happened around 2021. And the quotes that I mentioned from the YouTube video as well happened sometime around 2019. So all of these were pretty recent. These interviews, the song, the situation that happened with Amara La Negra, they were all pretty recent, while Esruli's Skirt actually was based on a time that happened around the mid-1900s. The urbanization of Dominican Republic happened around the mid-1900s, I would say. And that's how this book was based on. And now, yes, there has been progress as years have gone by, but has it been enough? Which is a question that I feel like we need to ask ourselves. Because it's very disappointing to see and hear things like this still happen to this day and age. As Rafa Pabon mentioned in his interviews, there needs to be growth and progress, which is very true. None of these things should still be happening in this day and age. People should not be living in fear in their own country that they were born in, where they have their own documentation. None of this should be happening at all. To conclude, actually, I want to give a brief recap of what I mentioned in my podcast today. As mentioned, people are already being rude and tearing us down and discriminating us out for how we look, for something that we can't change, for our skin color. And instead of us being a community, people within the same country are tearing each other down. And this shouldn't be normalized, the same way how Rafa Pabon mentioned in his interview. And on that note, thank you for listening to my segment. And now let's move on to the next group member from this podcast.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
I'm Elizabeth Gonzalez.
And I'm Zachary Quintero.
And we got some songs to talk about for y'all. And I'm going to be talking about El Niagara en Bicicleta, which basically means crossing the Niagara Falls on a bicycle, by Juan Luis Guerra.
I love him. I grew up listening to him.
He's like everywhere. And for you guys who don't know, he's an internationally recognized Dominican singer and songwriter who was born in Santo Domingo, which is where I'm from. And he's a multi-Grammy and Latin Grammy winner. And he focuses on the vibrant harmonies and rhythms. And he's just such a cultural icon.
I grew up watching his concerts like throughout the year, but I specifically remember like the holiday season, we would have like his music in the background and sing his concerts. Awesome.
Yeah, it's great. And I feel like everybody has listened to him at least once, not even knowing that it's his song.
I know.
Whether it's like his harmony, what's on the street, social media, TikTok, everything's on TikTok.
For real.
And on Instagram, so maybe you've listened to it, but you haven't realized. So like I said, the title of the song basically means crossing the Niagara Falls on a bicycle. And listening to that in English, you're like, what does that mean? Like, what do you mean crossing basically a whole waterfall on a bike? What does that mean? But
Titles can sometimes throw you off sometimes. But
It throws you off,
But
yeah.
it makes you want to listen to the song sometimes. You're like, you know what? What is that? That caught my attention.
You know what? Because, Spanish songs, they be having some weird titles, but then you listen
Always.
to it. You're like, wait, this is kind of cool. So, yeah, overall, like, the bigger picture of the song revolves around, like, healthcare resources, the lack of healthcare resources for Dominican citizens, because it creates such a dangerous and unreliable environment for people who are soon to be mothers, people who injure themselves with chronic illnesses, and just anything you can think of that you would need to go to the hospital for. And of course, there are so many great hospitals located in the country. I'm not about to hate on my country and say they don't have that, but there's a lot of, like, because the country is really unfortunate and not wealthy like the United States, there are many parts of the country that lack a lot of, like, essential resources. So going into, like, the lyrics of the song, it's in Spanish, but I'm going to be singing in English and Spanish. So it's, like, kind of understanding what's going on. So, yeah, crossing the Niagara Falls on the bicycle, highlighting how it becomes unreliable to go to a hospital in the Dominican Republic and get the resources that you need. And I'm going to be referencing an article written by Cylin Miller called The Quality of Institutionalized Deliveries, The Paradox of the Dominican Republic. I'm not going to read the entire quote because it's going to sound really choppy, but basically it's talking about how there's a lot of uncomplicated labor and deliveries that were either over-medicalized or under-medicalized. There's a lot of overcrowding and understaffed hospitals with at least like 50% of people who attend these hospitals don't get the actual help that they need. And emergencies are not dealt with in a timely fashion. And it just aligns with the poverty and underfunded hospitals that it's just such a, what's the word? I don't know.
No, it's just hard to hear about that.
It's just hard to hear.
Especially when you have family out there too and you realize that they don't have the same resources that you have in a different country,
Yeah.
And you sometimes you can only pray. I know you have family out in DR, I have family in PR, and we struggle with the same thing. We don't have the exact resources, even when it comes to like emergency resources. I know when it comes to like climate change and climate devastation. I remember the hurricane that took place in Puerto Rico. We didn't have the resources needed, and in terms of resources, we didn't have the resources for homes and for hospitals as well. So I get that completely.
It's just so sad. But getting into the beginning of the song, Juan Luis is basically talking about he's fainting and he's feeling sick. Yeah, first he says, me dio un sirimba un domingo en la mañana, cuando menos lo pensaba. Meaning I had a fainting spell on Sunday when I least expected it. Me llevaron a un hospital de gente, supuestamente. Me chequearon la presión, pero dijeron que la sala estaba ocupada, which basically means they took him to a quote-unquote real hospital, but they needed to check his pressure, but all the rooms were occupied. And then another part of the song says, y mi querido, en este hospital no hay luz para un electrocardiograma, which basically means in this hospital there's no electricity for an EKG. And just listening to those words, you're like, well, how are these patients supposed to be helped or get treated? And it just basically goes to show the reality of the healthcare system in the Dominican Republic, because he's basically trying to get help, but the staff can't get him the resources that he needs. And any studies that he needs to check what's wrong. And it goes back to another article by Rafael Perez Escamilla, and he basically talks about how even individuals in the United States, they either came from their country and immigrated into the United States to get a better life, but even when they're trying to get access to healthcare, they struggle to make appointments, get a doctor, even just get some type of help to help their kids. But even coming from a country that lacks a lot of viable resources, they come here and they can't get what they need. And going into the chorus of the song, he says, no me digan que los médicos se fueron, que no tienen anestesia. No me digan que el alcohol se lo bebieron. No me digan que las pinzas se perdieron. No me digan que los rayos X se fueron y que el suero ya se usó para endulzar el café. That basically means don't tell me that the doctors left, that there's no anesthesia, that they drink all the alcohol. Not alcohol, like the ones that you use to sterilize,
They
don't
both get you lit, though.
Don't get you lit. Don't tell me that the x-rays burned out and that the IV fluid was used to sweeten coffee. And it just sounds all like really bizarre, but listening to the song, you don't really understand what's going on until you actually listen to the lyrics. But it's just a lot of critiques that highlight the vulnerability of people in situations like that because of such a dysfunctional system that lacks a lot of medical supplies. And at the end of the day, I think it's really important to talk about how Latin American citizens, they try to find like natural remedies that don't have to do with like actual pills or anything, mainly things that are natural, herbal.
Besides Vicks.
Besides Vicks. I'm a victim to just always using Vicks. Yes. But there's a lot of like natural remedies and self-medication practices that they help to further push ethnomedical research, because at the end of the day, you're living in a country like that. Sometimes you have to resort to the natural things that aren't having to do with harsh chemicals that you don't even know what's in them. So
Holistic measures, yeah.
Holistic measures, yeah. So I feel like one of the bigger things that can be done in the Dominican Republic to help with this is to pushing the studies of natural resources in order to heal citizens that even though not a lot of natural remedies heal everything that can be going on with you, there's a lot of different natural resources that can help you, whether it's mentally, spiritually, physically. And I feel like it's really important, especially in countries that lack a lot of medical supplies. And overall, the song is really beautiful, and I wish I could play it right now. It's such a good song, but you know, I hope maybe you listen to this song after this podcast, but it's a beautiful melody. It's of the genre of merengue, and it's a traditional Dominican music genre. And Juan Luis Guerra uses this for a lot of storytelling. The song overall is beautiful, but it also brings a lot of light to the impossibility of these hardships and the lack of healthcare that is public to a lot of citizens within the Dominican Republic. And it's basically as if crossing the Niagara Falls on a bicycle. You can't do that. In the Dominican Republic, it's really hard to get useful resources that you need to just heal as a person. And going back to the theme of like colonialism, I feel like a lot of fault is within the Europeans once they were colonizing the Dominican Republic and Haiti. As an example, in the Caribbean, they took a lot of Dominican slaves and transported them elsewhere. So, you know, just from that, even once they gain their independence, it's hard to bounce back, right? From being under colonial power and then coming back as a country, trying to rebuild yourself. It's just a lot of back and forth trying to have a stable country, you know? Even as beautiful as it is, there's a lot of things that people don't talk about in the media, because you see like a bunch of ads of like resorts in Dominican Republic. Oh, you gotta go here, gotta go there, but we gotta get down to the nitty gritty of what's really going on, you know? So yeah.
That's similar to mine, because it's like my song focuses on the beauty of the island, but also focuses on like the negative part of the island, what people don't really see, and the untold history, also like the untold truth of the island. I wanted to talk about a popular song, a very well-known song in the Puerto Rican community, titled Preciosa. It's written by Mark Anthony, who's you know what Mark Anthony?
I love Mark Anthony. My mom loves him.
He's a very famous Puerto Rican artist who most Puerto Ricans grew up listening to, and most people, I guess, in the Spanish community grew up listening to, despite his New York background. He was born in New York, making him a New Yorker.
Period.
So he is Puerto Rican, of course.
Puerto Rican,
but he's born in New York, making him a New Yorker. Shout out to my New Yorkers out there. So yeah, I wanted to highlight first that the song is titled Preciosa. Like you said before, it translates to precious, and he highlights what makes the island so beautiful. Not just the physical beauty, but specifically the beauty of the island before it was colonized. The song starts off with Yo sé, I'm not going to sing it. Yo sé lo que son los encantos de mi Borinquen hermosa. Meaning, I know what's enchanting about my beautiful Borinquen. And when he says Borinquen, he's actually referring to the Taino name for Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico's first people were the Tainos, an indigenous group who lived in the island for centuries before the Spanish arrived, which I thought was cool to hear through almost through storytelling, but this was through a song. Yeah. So we're learning some history through a song.
We need more of that in this culture.
For sure. And he goes on to sing Isla de Caribe, Borinquen. Again, not calling it Puerto Rico, the name that that it was changed by colonizers, but rather the original name of the Caribbean island when the Taínos were living there, calling it Borinquen. And the song continues with, Preciosa te llaman los bardos que cantan tu historia, meaning, precious you are called by the poets who sing your story. Then after he sings, No importa el tirano de trate con negra maldad, which translates to, it doesn't matter that the tyrant treats you with black evil. And I believe he sings this to show that despite oppression and colonization, the history of the island won't be silenced. So he refers to earlier, he says that precious you are called by the poets who sing your story, which I think is important because he's highlighting that not just him, but blessed are those and the other poets and other singers and musicians who speak of the history of the island because they are literally being silenced on the island. Just because they want to be a free nation. So that leads into my almost my last point. Now, a beautiful line that stuck out to me was when Mark Anthony said, Preciosa será sin bandera, sin lauros ni gloria. Meaning you would be precious without a flag, without laurels nor glory, which is beautiful because he's saying the island's beautiful no matter who or what takes over.
When you hear songs like this, you're like, oh yeah, like this is a beautiful country. But then back to what you were saying earlier, we got to really think about what it was like before colonialism, the beauty of the country before, outside measures came and either destroyed it or killed its native people. So it's like, for songs like this, I feel like it's really interesting, even with my song, like how colonial measures does so much destruction to a country. But then we really got to reflect back on what's actually beautiful and meaningful to like the deeper culture within both of our cultures of being Puerto Rican and Dominican.
And I think a big theme that we focused on this semester was names.
Mm-hmm.
And literally this has to do with the name of the island, which has to do with like the beauty of it. This has to do with like referring to the original name of the island before it was colonized. And I think it's a beautiful thing that these artists want to continue that legacy of keeping the original name alive, even though it's still being colonized, even though the name was changed. They still refer to it and reflect on it, which I think is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, because name gives you power. So like the power that was given after by the colonizers is a different meaning for them compared to its native citizens, because for them it's like, oh, we were given this name, like it's not really, there's no actual tie to it. Back to like one of the readings we had where the name that she had was something that from her mom that she didn't resonate with, and she felt like it was like dehumanizing for her. But her taking power over her own name, it's more powerful.
Yep, that's why a great comment, taking the power back.
Taking the power back,
through names, and I think that was very symbolic throughout the semester and also throughout this song. I'm almost done here. He goes on to say, Preciosa, preciosa, te llaman los hijos de la libertad. Meaning precious, precious, the sons of liberty will call you, highlighting how everyone calls the island precious. And then he ends the song by repeating, he does it through instruments and through, I guess, not a salsa break, but an instrumental break. And he sings, Yo te quiero Puerto Rico, which connects our island's history to today. He says, Yo te quiero Puerto Rico, because he's no longer saying or referring to the island as Borinquen Island, but now he's referring to Puerto Rico as its actual name, the name that was changed to. Today, it's no longer the Isla de Borinquen, which is the indigenous Taino name for the island, but now called Puerto Rico after being colonized, which means rich port. I don't think that's even entertaining. Like, rich port is not fun.
What is that?
Fun? Like, at least give us a cool name. If you're going to give us a different
look at
name.
rich port.
Exactly.
What?
Like,
it's like something that you would say like upstate, like some
they're
town
lucky
or
to
something.
Spanish. They're lucky to Spanish.
Like,
It sounds better. But I think that overall, it's a beautiful traditional song. It's a traditional love song that includes instruments. And when I wanted to like include this because I don't think it has like a specific genre. Like, it's not really like a salsa merengue song. It's more of like an anthem. And
I love that.
Yeah, like which I think is awesome because it's an anthem mixed with a love song that comes together, and it makes I guess a beautiful, like I said, a beautiful anthem or a beautiful pledge to its history, and
it's like a symbol.
Exactly, and it allows us to remember our island's history. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you guys for listening. I feel like both of our songs has a lot of power and meaning, and I feel like we need more of that within this culture to really address either colonial pressures and the reality of our countries and how beautiful it is at the end of the day.
And if I have any advice, take your name back, okay?
Yes, take power over what's yours, rightfully yours.
And if you don't like your name, you better change it, okay?
Right.
You got that power, okay?
For sure, for sure.
Good morning, listeners. Thank you for tuning into this week's edition of Sovereign Conversations. I'm your host, Sovereign Mac, and today we'll be diving into a song that resonates deeply with me, not just because of the beat, but because of the weight of its message. The song we're discussing today is Africa Must Wake Up by Nas and Damien Jr. Gong Marley off their 2010 album, Distant Relatives. In this episode, I'll break down the lyrics, focusing on themes of colonialism, slavery, and identity, while reflecting on how these themes have shaped me as a Black woman who grew up in Arizona and Texas, a place where I often felt disconnected from my roots and disempowered by the weight of history. Stick with me as we unpack the intersection of music, history, and the long journey for self-empowerment. Now, before I jump into the lyrics, let's talk a bit about the artist and the broader context. Nas, born Nasir bin Oludara Jones, is a New York rapper whose music has always spoken to the struggles of Black Americans, particularly in urban communities. As someone who grew up in the Queensboro projects of Queens, Nas has often reflected on the consequences of slavery and how it impacts Black communities in modern-day America. His album, Illmatic, speaks to the systemic issues that affect the Black community, issues that, for me, were often a part of my own experience as a Black woman growing up in the American Southwest. Damien Marley, nicknamed Junior Gong, is the youngest son of the legendary Bob Marley. He brings the voice of the Caribbean to this collaboration. Born in Kingston, Jamaica, Junior Gong was raised in the heart of reggae culture and, like his father, uses his music as a tool for empowerment and social change. His contributions to reggae and hip-hop merge with Nas's in Distant Relatives, a project that explores the shared history of Black people across the globe. It's not just about music, this album. It's about reclaiming identity and how important that is for us as Black people, Black Americans, Black Africans, Black Caribbeans. The song Africa Must Wake Up is part of this mission. Reggae and hip-hop are both deeply rooted in the struggle against colonialism. Reggae has long been a voice for Jamaica's resistance against colonial forces, and hip-hop emerged as a way for marginalized Black communities in the U.S. to tell their stories. So when Nas and Marley come together, it's more than just two artists collaborating. It's a merging of cultures that shares the common pain of colonialism and the ongoing fight for liberation. Now, let's break down some of the key lyrics in Africa Must Wake Up. I remember the first time I heard this song. It was played on repeat by my boss at a Jamaican restaurant I work at, Big Tings. I heard it so many times. At first, I just took it as background music, annoying and overstimulating. But the more I listened, the more I realized the song was saying something that resonated with me on a deeper level. I felt like the lyrics were speaking to my own search for identity and the struggles of reclaiming my roots. All right, let's break down some lyrics. Let's start with the hook by Damien Marley. He sings, "Yesterday we were queens." Oops, not queens. He sings, "Yesterday we were kings. Can you tell me, young ones, who are we today?" These words hit me hard. For much of my life, I felt disconnected from my history. Growing up in Arizona, I didn't have the kind of community where I could connect with other Black people the same way someone might in larger cities with a more visible African diaspora. There were no Black cultural centers, no close-knit Black families, and no sense of cultural belonging. These lyrics echo that feeling of disempowerment that so many of us in the diaspora feel. The "Yesterday we were kings" line reminds us of the greatness of pre-colonial African civilizations, a greatness that was stolen from us by colonial forces. This line speaks to the lost heritage of people like me, people whose roots were severed by slavery, and makes me wonder, who are we today? What parts of us have been lost in the centuries since we were stripped of our true identity? These questions I've often asked myself, especially growing up in a place where I didn't see many Black role models or people who looked like me. In her dissertation, Warriors and Prophets of Liberty, Samson and Moses as Moral Exemplars in Rastafari, Ariella Worden-Greenfield comments on the displacement of culture as a result of colonialism. She mentions how colonial powers saw African slaves as uncultured blank slates, thus ideal for use in the plantation system and susceptible to the ideas of white supremacy. But Africans brought with them their knowledge, culture, and religion and passed them down through generations, despite slaveholders' every effort to suppress them. This is why Black culture is so important. It holds the voices of the ancestors' pain and knowledge, and to sing and dance and share our art is a celebration of how far we've come and how unwilling we are to be silenced by our oppressors. In the second verse, Nas raps, "The makeshift youth, The slave ship captured, our diaspora is the final chapter. The ancestral lineage built pyramids, America's first immigrant. When I first heard these lines, they felt like a direct challenge to my understanding of history. The makeshift youth refers to the generations of Black people who were displaced and forced into an identity that was not their own. The slave ship captured, our diaspora line speaks to the forced migration that split our people apart and scattered us across the world. For me, this was a reminder of the ways in which my ancestors were taken from Africa and how that loss of land and culture affects me, even today. My grandma was born and raised in Jamaica, and she immigrated here when she was 19, yet she never speaks of her home. I can't help but imagine what my relationship with my grandma and my mother and all of my extended family would be without the effects of colonialism. The reference to our ancestral lineage built pyramids line is a powerful one. It reminds us that Africa was once home to powerful civilizations that were the intellectual and cultural center of the world. Yet, because of colonialism and slavery, that knowledge was erased from history books, and for many Black people like myself, reclaiming that knowledge is part of our healing. In an interview with Tim Wood after the album release, Nas and Damian Marley are asked how their respective African-American and Jamaican roots are connected to Africa. Marley replies that the bigger idea is, in quotes, "We are all human." White supremacy taught us divisiveness uplifts the individual, but the whole message of the album is that we stand stronger united, and our shared history of loss and exploitation binds every member of the diaspora together, regardless of location. We are one people, united in grief, as Kendrick refers to on the track title on his album Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. The final quote comes from the break before the Somali outro by Kanan, rapped once again by Nas. He raps, "We're all distant relatives, no matter where you come from, where you live." This line was one of the most powerful moments for me in the song. It speaks to the idea that despite the pain and separation caused by colonialism, we're all still connected. No matter if you're from Jamaica, America, Africa, or anywhere else in the diaspora, we share a history. We share a lineage that stretches back to Africa, and that connection is one that no force, no matter how powerful, can break. In the 87th issue of Off Your Radar, a site that highlights one album a week, writer Davy Jones tells us, quote, "Distant Relatives finds that uncertain place where individual identity meets world politics, which is what makes it such a smart and effective document of living as part of a diaspora," end quote. I think about how important it is to find a sense of belonging in the world that often makes you feel like you don't belong anywhere. In my own search for identity, these lyrics offer a kind of reassurance that even though I felt disconnected from my African roots for so long, I'm still part of something much larger than myself. Now that we've finished dissecting the lyrics, let's move on to some commentary and analysis. As a Black woman who grew up in a predominantly white state, I often felt like I didn't truly belong. My parents did the best they could to teach me about Black history, but there were no cultural markers in my everyday life that could help me ground myself. I wasn't taught about the psychological impacts of colonialism in school, and I didn't see much representation of Black culture in my community, if I even had a community. It was easy to feel stripped of my identity, like I was floating somewhere between two worlds, too Black to fit in with white people, but not Black enough to feel truly connected to a larger community. That feeling of disempowerment is something that colonialism left in its wake. Colonialism didn't just take land, it took identities, it took languages, and it took the sense of self-worth that comes from knowing your heritage. I see now that reclaiming that identity, understanding where I come from, and celebrating the resilience of my ancestors is part of my healing journey, and the healing journey of millions that share a similar story to me. The psychological scars of colonialism are deep, but through art, through music, we can begin to rebuild. To wrap up, the song Africa Must Wake Up is more than just a song for me. It's a mirror that reflects my own struggles with identity, but also a message of hope. Nas and Damian Marley's collaboration isn't just about music. It's about reclaiming the power and pride that was stolen from us. As someone who spent much of my life searching for my identity, this song speaks to me in a way I didn't expect. The lyrics offer a call to action, a reminder that no matter where we come from, we're all connected, and it's time for us to wake up, reclaim our power, and embrace the greatness that was once ours. I want to thank my boss, Sean, for introducing me to this song. Initially, like anything repeated too much, I quickly got sick of it. I didn't appreciate the lyrics at first, but now I see its deeper meaning. The scattered African diaspora is more than just a historical fact or a matter of geological separation. It's a lived experience for so many of us, and Africa Must Wake Up is a reminder that we must continue to fight to reclaim our identity. Thank you for joining me today on Sovereign Conversations. I hope this episode has inspired you to reflect on your own identity and how the legacies of colonialism and slavery have shaped who you are today. As always, stay engaged, stay curious, and remember, our history is our power. Sovereign out. Thanks so much for listening to our podcast. We hope you got some laughs and some knowledge on a few great Caribbean artists. Tune in next week for our mukbang of delicious foods from the islands. Take care.